Welcome to Tuesdays at 2 with Haven. Today is session 7 of our Tuesdays at 2. We are talking about lighting today with Blair King. So we'd like to thank Blair for joining us. This is his contact information. He is out of the Lakeview office of Crest Lighting and Paramount EO. I will turn it over to you for a second, Blair. Go ahead and introduce yourself and let us know anything that you'd like to share.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I've been...
Oh, you're on mute.
I'm on mute.
Get you unmuted there. There you go. Oh, I still can't hear. Are you there?
You can unmute him, Julie, if you click on his icon. I mean, he's unmuted now. Let's see. Yeah.
I don't know why I'm not hearing something now. This was working.
He had a connection issue. I think it's connecting now. Now. I think if he unmutes now, it should work.
Hello.
Oh, there you are. Great. We got it.
Ooh, okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Blair. I've been in the lighting industry for 22 years, going on 23. So I've been around the block a little bit with this kind of stuff. I fell into it backwards and didn't really expect to have a lighting career, but it's been fun. And there's an artistic side to it that I really enjoy. There's a mechanical thing, the nuts and bolts thing that I really enjoy. And there's an educational part that I really tend to gravitate towards to help people kind of solve their own problems. So that's where I hit things from. There's certainly the aesthetic side to lighting, and then there's the functional side and the nuts and bolts side, and some of it can get quite technical. And I try and keep it as lay terminology as we can, but there is some stuff you need to know, and some of it's very helpful.
That's awesome. So tell me a little bit about your passion for lighting. I know that you said you got into it unexpectedly, but what's been so grabbing that you've stayed in it for the last 20 plus years?
I think the fact that it's constantly changing is what keeps my interest going. Either the technology's changing or the style and the decor and the materials are changing. I didn't really know that I had a flair for interior design or contribution to interior design, but it's worked out. And I can get very excited with a lot of different projects, from simple powder room renovations to restaurants or hotel lobbies and that kind of stuff. So it's really the full gamut of stuff that I've dealt with over the years, and it's been a lot of fun. And it continues to be that way. And here I am 23 years later after taking a part-time job. I'm still in it.
Well, no, and Blair's joining us from his showroom in today. So the lighting you see behind him is from the store, which is nice to have that little ambiance behind us as we talk through it. We'll go ahead and get started here, moving into our overview of what we want to talk about today in Lighting 101. And it's kind of the basics. And we're going to start touching base a little bit with some of the styles of lighting. Blair's going to speak to light bulb colors and types of light bulbs that are available now. You know, things are changing from watts to lumens and kelvins, and we've got to learn how to function with this new technology too. So we'll go ahead and jump in here and go on to getting this all going, and I'll let Blair speak to the best basic styles of lighting here.
Sure. Well, I think we're all familiar with what light fixtures do. So there are chandeliers, and there are lights that are on the ceiling, and there are lights that are on the walls, and some of them have different purposes. Some of them shed light in different directions, in different amounts, and all of that can help work towards creating a dramatic feel for the space, or address a task for a space. And those, as a lighting professional, we tend to think of things in layers of light. So we have general illumination light that's going all around us. There's task lighting for a lot of residential situations. That might be countertop lighting or under cabinet lighting to light your countertop, or lighting over your island. And then there's directional lighting, where you really want to concentrate light on a particular area. And anytime you can use multiple versions of those in a particular space is where you really start to enhance the lighting in a particular space. You'll hear me probably say this several times throughout this, but good lighting for any room comes from multiple points of light and multiple sources of light in different directions, if we can. And that all works to produce that cozy, inviting, warm, all those fun words we want to associate with our homes, spaces. And yeah, a lot of people don't take the time to think about that or don't really understand that. And they think putting up a single fixture in the middle of a room is the sole lighting plan. And there's so much more to it that can create drama and really step up the quality of their home.
Yeah,
How you
that's
feel
the
in it.
ambiance for sure. I know that
Yeah.
but working in design as well as staging, lighting is such an important part in setting the mood in any room that you walk into. So I definitely agree with you that having the multiple layers is super important.
Yeah.
And then kind of going with that, so now moving into a little bit about the watts, kelvins, and lumens, if you can speak to this a bit in terms of the difference
Sure.
and how we move through things.
Sure. Well, I think a lot of us have been thrown off by the government's decree to eliminate some of our favorite light bulbs that we've known and loved for years and years and years, and have brought in new technologies to replace these. And really that's been done more for a capacity of generating electricity standpoint, because standard light bulbs waste a lot of electricity, believe it or not. Only 10% goes to light. So any of the compact fluorescent and LED solutions are using a fraction of the energy that was once used and wasted. And now we're having to think in terms that have always been out there for me as a lighting professional, but have now been introduced to the general public, and things like lumens, which is the measurement of light, how much light is coming out of that light bulb, and color temperature, which is the color of light that's coming out of that light bulb, which we haven't always had to think about with an incandescent bulb, because we just bought an incandescent bulb, screwed it in, and that was the color it was. It was around 2700 Kelvin, which is a detail that's, I know, technical, but the color can really affect how you feel in a space as well. And again, warmth is usually one of those things that we want to associate with our homes, especially in cooler months. There are some regional differences around the country. For example, Florida loves their cool white. They love feeling cooler in their spaces, where we up in the north here like to feel warmer in our spaces. So there can be a trade-off, and some of it comes down to personal preference. But when we're shopping for light bulbs now, there's more information we need to know. And it is printed on the package, but we're dealing with color temperature now, lumen output, rather than buying a 60-watt light bulb, which we all know what that does and how that performs. So I've seen a lot of mistakes where people buy the wrong thing because they don't know what they're buying.
Is there an easy way to equivalate the two from watts into LED and kelvins and stuff like that? Is there a quick?
In terms of brightness, I mean, if you were comparing watts to watts, I roughly use a methodology of multiplying the LED wattage by 8 to sort of estimate where that's going to be from an incandescent light bulb conversion. There's no real conversion out there because the LED technology is moving very quickly. There's different vendors are doing different things. Different manufacturers are developing newer technologies. So you may have one bulb that gives 800 lumens, which would be equivalent to a 60-watt light bulb, but you may have one company that's doing it at 8 watts and another one that's doing it at 10.5 watts. Some of that may just be the age of the light bulb. You may have a light bulb that's been sitting on the shelf longer that somebody's still trying to retail. So that the wattage savings is going to be huge no matter which one you buy, whether it's 10 watts or 2. They're very, very close together from an energy usage standpoint on the electric bill. But the color of light is the one that gets people, and that's the color temperature.
Are there colors that you would recommend for specific rooms in terms of light bulb colors?
There are, and well, not necessarily room to room, but maybe house to business or residential to. It can change if you wanted to in your home. I would say that within a particular room or space that you would want to keep it relatively the same so you don't have mixed colors. So okay to do one thing in your kitchen and living room area, but the bedroom may want to be warmer. And that's fine. There's no problem mixing. Historically, 2700 Kelvin has been the incandescent color temperature, and halogen bulbs that we use, which is technically an incandescent bulb as well, have been 3000 Kelvin. So those are the two that you tend to see used residentially. The scale goes up from there, and all this it really relates to the Bunsen burner back in 7th grade science class when we were studying the colors of the flame. When you get into those blues, you get hotter. And when you see the yellows, it's all warmer. So it's an inverted scale of this measurement. So the lower the number, the warmer it is. The higher the number, the cooler it is.
Interesting.
So the cool white fluorescent light bulbs that everybody knows and hates, that was in every high school classroom from here to ever, was typically around the 4100 Kelvin. That is a very inexpensive bulb to produce, which is why so many institutions have them, which is why we all have a hatred of fluorescent lighting when we go to a hotel and wonder why we look gray when we look in the mirror. So those warmer color temperatures are usually ones we need to look for. So when we're looking at LED packaging, we want to look for 2700 or 3000 Kelvin to make us feel normal.
Yeah, I understand. Because that's something that we tell people a lot in staging is when we want them to neutralize their home, we tell them to make sure they're picking one light bulb color and sticking with it throughout their entire house. Again, to neutralize a bit of the experience that buyers feel when they walk through a space. So that's one thing that we definitely lean towards with them is having that cohesiveness through the entire unit.
And from a selling standpoint, that makes a lot of sense because they're just looking at one palette. They're not looking at somebody else's idea of what should be in the space.
Right.
They're just taking that single snapshot as they're doing a walkthrough or whatever. And it's important to keep those things the same, certainly, or as close as you can.
Yeah, that's very helpful, though. Thank you for that. Well, let's dive in a little bit more here into the various types of lighting and sources. So we'll start with kind of going top to bottom from ceiling to wall to tables and then floor.
Sure.
So starting with our ceiling lights in terms of chandeliers, pendants, flush mounts, and semi-flush mounts. Just give us a little bit of an overview of what you see as, working and not working for people.
Sure. And I think this is where we start to bring in the layers of light idea and really trying to establish where light's going to go from a particular fixture. So a chandelier, as we think about it, may have little light bulbs, maybe 6 or 8 of them around a surround, and that's going to give us a lot of ambient light. That's going to let light go in all directions. It's going to let light hit the ceiling and reflect back down into the space as well as go outward. There may be pendants over an island, for example, that are glass and let light come through them. And those would be more of an ambient selection of fixture where a solid shade, a metal shade over the light bulb is going to have much more of a directional effect to the lighting, and it's just going to allow light to go downward onto the surface and not contribute to the atmosphere of the room so much. So your choice of fixture, whether it's pendant or chandelier, may help you to create more or less light depending on what's needed for a particular space. Sconces are those fixtures that are on the wall. And I think especially in a lot of open floor plan situations now where we're having trouble lighting larger spaces, that they can work miracles in adding light to a space, adding a layer of light and humanizing that space and making it feel less one-dimensional in a room full of recessed lights, for example. Recessed lights are great at doing what they do. They light horizontal surfaces really, really well. They're not always great for ambient light. And that ambient light typically from recessed light hits through reflection. But if you have dark floors and dark walls and you like that Ralph Lauren purple wall paint, you're not going to have very much reflection around the room. And sometimes that has to be combated by wattage or lumens to get that light around the room so that you can still read when you sit down in your favorite chair in your purple room. So materials can play a big role in lighting. Just paint selection alone can change
the way that the light will cast.
Yeah, absolutely. And that may also drive them a color bulb choice. some of the gray tones that are popular now in wall paint, for example, don't always pop the way they should in a 2700 Kelvin, which is a fairly yellow, warmish light. And sometimes going higher up the scale to a 3000 Kelvin light source will make that brighter gray, if you will, and appear more neutral or natural as we would anticipate it to.
Sure. And then one thing too, and we see this often in the city, and we'll move into some sconce lighting here, but that is a lot of the overhead lighting in high rises, there is no overhead light. So then we move to walls. We kind of take it down to the next step a little bit.
Right, and yeah, that's huge in our area anyway. With the high rises, the concrete ceilings are a big curveball to a lighting person, and we've combated it from walls. Even ceiling lights mounted on ceilings are usually powered from the walls and not being powered from the ceiling through some device, either track lighting or some sort of conduit system to get a ceiling light up there. But yeah, the walls become a very, very big player in high-rise lighting, and sneaking a sconce in here and there can really work to humanize the space and take some of the cold concrete away.
Yeah, and I'm seeing a lot too in terms of design, as you can see in this photo here, but like it's active in every room too. There's almost no room where sconce lighting is not being used at this point, but particularly loving it in bedrooms at this moment myself, and kind of just the ideas of the different ways that you can set the ambiance in each space by having the overhead light, and then if you want to turn that off and have just your sconces on, or if you want to have them both on for ultra brightness, but having that additional layer is really, really helpful. And again, they're in every single space that we're designing at this point too. So
yeah, and again, any space is going to have good lighting coming from multiple points of light in multiple directions of light. And if we can really throw a capper in there, don't forget about the dimmers. Dim everything. Dim your bathroom lights. Dim your outdoor patio lights. It's a very inexpensive way to change the way our space feels for $25. You put a $25 dimmer in, and you can have infinite light levels. And if we have layers of light and control those separately as well, then we can really have dynamics into a particular room.
Yeah, and that touches on a lot of what we'll get to when we get to the smart lighting too.
Right.
But kind of moving down into the tables, then the next layer down would be anything that's got a surface. And you can see again that these table lamps, as we notice, we use them in every space, even in staging. So there's no limits with these as well.
Yeah, and people don't often think of them as part of their lighting plan for a space. And when they're developing new homes even, they don't always take into account that there will be additional lighting added to a space through table lamps and floor lamps. And those are a perfect way to humanize a space and to add ambient light into a space or directional light to a reading area, and really offset the aesthetic or have the aesthetic pop too. It's a neat way to add art, if you will, into the space, because there's so many decorative table and floor lamps out there that really can enhance the decor that you're trying to establish.
Mm-hmm. And I love that you referred to this earlier as portable lighting, and I wanted to kind of bring that back up again, because when you first wrote to me about that, I thought that was interesting. I've never actually, even as I've designed spaces, thought about it like that, but it's portable lighting, and it's very usable and it's very flexible that way too.
Yeah, and certainly it gives you the ability to move it around. Not that you're carrying it around with you.
Right.
But not only table and floor lamps, but even some accent lamps can be considered that. So picture lamps, those little canister lights that you can put in the corner behind a plant, or plant lights. Mm-hmm. Those are really neat ways to accent a room fairly simply and inexpensively to give new dimension.
That's a good tip. I like that one a lot. Okay, then we got floor lamps, and then looking at this space, I mean, your popular rooms are going to be living rooms, offices, and bedrooms with floor lamps. I mean, there's really no family rooms, a couple in with living rooms, but there's, again, not a whole lot of spaces where that's not as applicable as well, just having the floor lamp in there to add that extra layer and something with the height. That's what I love about a good floor lamp. But you want to do a little discussing about uplighting, downlighting, and when to use them both?
Sure. Well, again, anytime you can use multiples, so up and down is great. Yeah, I think there's a lot of there's a lot of terminology out there, and we can talk about it in sort of terms of direct and indirect light if you want. Some of the indirect torchère lamps that aim light up at the ceiling can be a great way to add a lot of lumens into a space without necessarily adding brightness or glare into the space. Very important, unbelievably, in home offices. And a lot of home offices are poorly lit by just having a ceiling light and a desk light or a couple of recessed lights. And they don't get that indirect light bouncing around the space to help, you know, be able to read and write and type and do all the fun things we do from our home office. Uplighting is probably the least used because there's not a ton of fixturing for it, or it takes a lot of planning in the building process to get uplighting in there. So those portable can lights or accent lights are a great way to add that uplight into a space. But there are floor recess lights and there are floor lighting fixtures that can be added if planned for to highlight walls and architectural details or brickwork or stonework. There are some really neat ways to do that. And you see that probably much more in actually landscape lighting outside the home, where you're lighting facades of buildings and that kind of stuff. And you see a lot of that uplighting happen there.
Is there a good rule of thumb in terms of like if there's a high ceiling or a low ceiling, which direction of light you should be using for the space?
Well, high ceilings also present a whole number of new challenges because light tends to get dimmer over distance. So light is coming out of a particular fixture. If you picture a recess fixture, for example, that's light just aiming straight down towards the floor. The light coming out of that is shaped in a cone. And if that cone gets too wide, there's no light down below to really function with. And so we start talking about specific light bulbs in terms of beam spread, how much of an angle is coming out of that fixture. So a higher fixture would use a narrower beam spread to get the light back down on the ground and function. There may be a situation where we need to lower the light fixtures down off the ceiling to enter the human space to be able to let the light function for us in the human space and not necessarily light up 10 feet above us. And again, materials play a big role in some of the choices we make in those higher ceiling applications. Anytime we can involve reflection and reflectivity in a higher quotient, that's going to improve the lighting of that space. For a long time, we had the McMansions going with the two-story foyers, and those can be a challenge for some decor selections or some types of lighting that people fall in love with. And some of the modern light fixtures, for example, may not have as much light output than the traditional old grandma chandelier style fixture in those spaces. So it's kind of we have to address those situations a little more closely than just slapping a fixture into them.
Sure. And speaking of the more modern technologies, we've moved a lot into the smart lighting and the touchless lighting and modernization of what we've been able to offer clients and what you're starting to see. I'm sure you're way more involved in this than I have been with clients, but and speaking to just the environment in general with the pandemic, I think we might be seeing a lot more touchless and smart technology being used here now that we're really trying to be cognizant of how we all share and touch space.
Sure. There's so much technology coming at us every day with the smart home stuff, even down to where particular light bulbs can be screwed in and they can connect to the Wi-Fi system and through an app on your phone allow you to change dimming levels, light levels, colors. There's a lot of fun stuff there. I think some of the more robust systems, the smart home systems, physically change the light switches in the home with a smart device, and that's all brought together through a central brain or application of some kind to be able to then create scenes. And we've seen this done commercially for years. Restaurants have used this technology for a long time, where you have daytime and nighttime functions of light that need to happen, and they push one button and all the dimmers level themselves out to preset demand. So the restaurant appears the same way each time, so the dining experience is the same way every time. We've seen this in a lot of conference rooms as well. for presentations. But now it's really getting into an affordable mode for the homeowner, and for relatively little money, you can really have a lot of fun. Some of that gets a little bit out of control. I don't know that I need to dim the powder room lights from my couch, or my master closet lights from my couch. But it does, if I did put a Wi-Fi switch, smart home switch in my closet, I could program all the switches to have an all off. So at the end of the night, I can turn the entire house off and know that everything's off in all the little nooks and crannies. So there's a trade-off to lifestyle a little bit.
If someone was trying to incorporate smart lighting into their home, where do you think is a really good place for them to start? What would be a good place to kind of dip your toe in without feeling?
I think where they spend the most time. So first floor living spaces, typically in a home, condos. So the living room, dining room, kitchen. You don't always need to involve the bedrooms, but I will tell you that some of these systems allow you to add switches where switches have never been before. So if you had a light switch in a weird place, like behind a door, and you wanted it to be out in front on the other side when you come into the room, there are ways to create a light switch without having to do any wiring. So there's like wireless switches that you can screw to the wall that look just like light switches and do all the functions of them, but are wirelessly communicating with the switch behind the door. Simple example, master bedroom lights. You may not have light switches by your bed. And this would be an easy way to be able to add a switch next to your bed and control the lights where there had not been light switches before. So some of the other examples, though, you could be arriving home with groceries in the dark, and you hit one button on your phone, and suddenly the outdoor lights come on, the hallway lights come on, the kitchen lights come on, so you don't have to be searching for light switches while your hands are full of groceries as you come into your house, and you can have a lit path going to your house. Or if you're entertaining, you can have preset modes to create scenes, and you can have an entertainment scene, and you hit one button and all your sconces and overhead lights adjust to preset levels that you establish, and it remembers those. And it can be a lot of fun, but I think there's a trade-off between cost at this point and function, and really what you need to know for your own lifestyle and what you're looking for.
So in theory, though, it really is like an idea that people could just make their whole home smart home lighting adept, and then they can just customize it however they want to when they get in.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And,
yeah,
and something like this wave light that's from Legrand, what's the price point on something like that? Or most of these?
You're probably a $50 or $60 switch from a retail standpoint. That's a switch that literally you wave your hand over to turn on and off a light. Sometimes used in garbage disposals. So when you have your hands all goopy at the sink while you're cooking, you can just wave your hand up above to turn on the garbage disposal, and you don't have to slime your wall.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing, isn't it?
Yeah, there's cool stuff coming out all the time. It's hard to keep up with almost.
Yes, and that actually segues us really nicely into what our last topic was going to be, the lighting trends and designs. And again, lighting it's a very primary conversation to have with clients when you're talking about design, because you basically want to design the space around the lighting sometimes, depending on how you're going to be using each room. And people are getting all sorts of creative. I mean, I love everything about all these photos that are happening here, but just showing, especially the sconces down the hallway, how lighting really does set a mood, and it has an artistic impact. I love that floor to ceiling light fixture and the stairwell there. And just seeing how all these various layers, like the one behind the sofa with it, the sconce lighting on the wall and the floor lamp next to it, covered behind that photo, you can't see it, but there's actually a desk space which has a small task lamp on it. And then people are using the various light fixtures, like in the upper right hand corner, to create that art without committing to art. It's just based on light. Sure.
And using light as art, or there are sconces that will throw patterns of light on a wall or into a space, and that can be fun too. So using a lot more theatrical attributes worked into the fixtures now. I think there's a lot of really neat things that are out there now that we haven't always had with the technology that's emerging. Certainly LEDs are our future as a country, and we're going to continue to see LED fixtures. They improve all the time. It is amazing how quickly things roll with them. And now we're addressing dimming issues and that kind of stuff with LEDs that we've finally fought through, and for the most part, they're very reliable from a dimming standpoint. But the layers of light in your home really can work to just make you feel good in your own space and add that drama. Lighting pictures in the living room, a simple picture light, and having that be brighter than the stuff around you or the ambient light really sets off a pop and creates different concentrations and focal points in the space. Again, knowing that I could vary that level at any time to my whim.
Yeah, and so with what we see a lot in staging, when we go in, especially new construction, we find that the lighting game is set to a different level. So a lot of the light fixtures that are already installed in these new construction places, they can be a little bit more specific. They can be very grand. And do you have any kind of tips or tricks for people to use these really artistic and beautiful light fixtures, but also to work them into a space so that they don't just stand out like a sore thumb either?
Yeah, I mean, some of it's going to come down to the core decisions in the space anyway. I think, yeah, there's a lot of, I'm going to throw out, there's a lot of minimalism right now coming out with LED fixtures. And sometimes those can look hollow or empty against what I'll call early American garage sale decor that I have, where heavier furniture and heavier things are paired with it. And I love the idea of being able to mix these two genres together and not being matchy-matchy throughout the home, and being able to put old with new. I've seen some very, very complex or very, very minimalistic contemporary homes, and they throw a vintage crystal chandelier in the mix just to offset and completely juxtapose the style, and it works. It does work. A lot of people, I think, are scared a little bit to go out of a comfort zone from a decor standpoint, and I would just caution you to go ahead. It's okay. There's no rules.
I agree with you, and I always like risk taking on that too. Do you have any, like, what we see a lot of and what we have been loving is the mixed metals, a lot of the combination of different elements in there. What trends are you seeing are top notch? What are people buying the most of right now, and where do you think this is all headed in terms of longevity?
I always said I would quit when polished grass came back around, and suddenly grass came back around, and I'm still enjoying it because it's a nice change from everything else that's been around. But yeah, there's something for everybody right now. There's so much product on the market. There are so many finishes on the market. The mixed metals, the mixed finishes, even within a piece itself, you may find gold and silver on the same piece, or gold and bronze on the same piece. Fine mixing. A lot of these open floor plans where you may bring in grandma's chandelier from your old house because it's a family heirloom, and that's going to sit there in the living room against your new modern furniture. You may want to have something more modern, and it's okay to introduce those things in their own environment and have them exist together. I'm not scared to mix finishes. I'm not scared to put bronze over the dining room table and have a brush nickel fan in the living room. Those are both considered weathered finishes, and if you back away from the bronze or the nickel and take a category of finish, I think it goes a long way to expanding some of the comfort zones that are out there.
Sure. Is there anything that you would consider to be more of a regional trend, kind of a Midwest thing that we do that the rest of the country doesn't, or vice versa, something that we don't do that we should be doing?
I don't know from a lighting standpoint or a decorating standpoint that there's anything regional other than some of the colors of lights and some of the finishes. Sometimes I'm caught. I have to hold myself back a little bit on a customer's whim, and it may be that their influences are coming from a different part of the country. Nautical, for example, a lot of East Coasters, North New England, there's a whole different style of that up there than we may have here readily available. I don't think there's anything Midwestern. I think we tend to get we're a little more fearful of change, if anything. We like to be matchy-matchy. I think a lot of people default to that, and I think that's the biggest thing that from a decor standpoint, that I find issue with. From a trend, I think we've seen recently this light industrial trend kind of come into play, where everything looks like a warehouse light or this restoration type product that's out there, and everybody gravitates towards it because it's warm and it's kind of what everybody's always known, because those fixtures have been out for years and years and years and years and years, style-wise. But you may see, a green warehouse light, and historically it's been black or galvanized. So there's fun stuff that enhances that.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate all of your knowledge on all this. It's great to have someone who's been in it for so long speak to this, because it's obviously effortless with you, and you can tell that your passion is there. The knowledge that you just gave to everyone was definitely worth 30 minutes. And I don't know, did any questions come in our chat at all? I'm not sure if we saw anything come up here. Like we are.
I mean, if anybody has,
there haven't been any chat questions now.
That's fine. But, well, we will go ahead and wrap this up. Blair, thank you again so much for your time today and for everything that you did to give us all the information here. Denise is going to be sending a recap email. She'll share these slides with everyone. We'll give a resource, and I'll send along with that the contact information to Blair at Crest Lighting. I highly recommend him. He's one of my favorite reps, always very responsive, super knowledgeable, and who's jumped up and said yes right away when I asked him to do this. So thank you again for your participation. We appreciate that.
My pleasure.
And for everyone looking to next week, we hope that you'll be back again to join us for our next Tuesday at 2. Very on time. We are doing the tips to prepare your owner-occupied properties for listing. And with the June market kicking off here, we are ready to go, and I'm sure everyone's looking forward to those tips and tricks. So you'll be meeting with Sherry next Tuesday, and we will look forward to seeing you all then. Thanks again, Blair. Thank you everyone for joining.
You're welcome. All right, take care.
Bye.